Let's just have a
Cool.
look here.
We are live, Debs.
We are live indeed.
Yeah.
I guess we'll probably have to just give it a bit to let people come in, and then we kick
Yeah.
off.
No, cool. Um, Hi, Debs. Go.
This is when we needed that embedded music element where we can just listen
No.
to some beats while we wait. We'll have to invest in a small Lanyana speaker that we can play music whilst we wait for people to enter the room.
No, there are people on, by the way. It's just
Yeah.
that I don't think we can see here. Otherwise,
Evening, everybody who's joining. Thank you for coming in right on time. If this was a Sunday, it would be carte blanche time, but because it's a Monday, uh, we are we are officially bringing the end to your weekend and introducing you to the rest of the week. But thanks for joining us. We will begin promptly in probably another minute or so. We just allowing for a few people to join us. We don't want to leave anybody behind, but we appreciate everybody who has joined on time. And yeah, all proceedings and all shall unravel in a few minutes' time. Sit tight, grab some popcorn, a glass of water, a glass of wine, whatever makes you chilled. This evening is just about connecting and relaxing. Not too formal, just two human beings sharing a story and a journey together. So we've got about 12 people online and probably on other platforms as well. So if we give it just a minute or two so that we can ramp up, then we kick off. But thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. Yep. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Just making sure audio is working. Do not be afraid. Sikhona, siyavakala, I hope. I just wanted to make sure people don't leave thinking that there's a glitch in their systems. So we're just waiting for one or two people to join us. Beautiful evening. It's getting chilly, so I hope you've got a little bit of a blanket wrapped around your feet as we sit in this inaugural fireside chats with Rise Mzansi. Um, yeah, so actually, let's kick off. I'm so excited to get into this. I get the rare opportunity to sit with my brother Songezo to really get into his head because truly he is an amazing human being, and I'm not just saying that because he's the national leader of Rise Mzansi, but I hope through this experience you'll get to get a sense of who Songezo is. So let me introduce the session first. My name is Tebogo Molausi. I'm the national spokesperson of Rise Mzansi. I sit as part of the National Leadership Collective, responsible essentially for the voice of Mzansi, of Rise Mzansi at least. And we wanted to build this platform to introduce Rise Mzansi to South Africa, but also to introduce and share a moment with some of the national leaders and provincial leaders of Rise Mzansi. We believe that getting to know the leaders and the people behind the organization is crucial because people are essentially what you follow when you get into organizations. So This is the inaugural Fireside Chats with Mzansi, hosted by myself, Tebogo Molausi, the national spokesperson. And what you will experience over the next coming Sundays, over a few weeks, are these sessions where we just chat through, getting to know the different leaders, but also the organization itself. It should take about 60 minutes, but I probably think it will take a little bit longer, knowing that sometimes these storytelling sessions do take more than an hour to get through. So bear with us. I'm going to apologize now for those if we do go over 8 o'clock at least. Know that it's because we are futumala around the fire, and we'd like to just keep things going. Thank you for joining us. So yeah, I think let's kick off. I've introduced myself, but there's somebody else on the screen, and his name is Songezo Zibi. Songezo is the national leader of Rise Mzansi. And Songezo, welcome, my brother. Welcome.
Debs, welcome. And I heard you saying there that you're going to try and get into my head, and that's assuming I'm open-minded. So.
Well, we'll see. We'll see
over
the
optimistic. You're very optimistic there, Debs.
I am. It's my nature. I see.
And I don't have a hole in my head, so. But let's see.
But Songezo, why are you wearing a golf T-shirt? I mean, I thought you'd be chilling at home in a gown. What's happening?
No, Tabza. I tell my friends that when sometimes I question my career choices because the things that don't pay you a bonus and give you weekends and leave, are the things that we do. So we work on weekends, as you know. That is actually the time that we try and switch it on because people have time to listen and go and take part in activities and so on. So yeah, so this is our uniform on weekends, and I would recommend that everybody who doesn't yet have a golf shirt. By the way, everybody, we have fantastic merchandise that Debza and the team have come up with. And what I'm wearing here, by the way, is nothing compared to what will be on our website in a in a little while. So so Debza, I'm very happy to be here though. But we work on
pleasure. So Songezo, what's in a name? I mean, I think the first gift we're given in our lives is the names we bear. And in African tradition and custom, names come with so much energy. Songezo Zibi. Who is Songezo Zibi? What's in the name?
So Tabza, let me tell you about the name. So Songezo in isiXhosa is when you get something more, you add onto something that's already there. I'm the first grandchild at home. So I was my grandparents' first grandchild, and therefore I'm theirs. And apparently I was given the name by a relative, my mom's cousin who stayed with us and was at Olomisa Senior Secondary School, Daniswa. So when the family got around the fire to work out what my name was going to be, then my name was Songezo, the name that they chose. And my second name is Sipio, which means a gift. That apparently came from my grandfather. And so my names are Songezo Sipio Zibi. And I love both, I must say. Both names have got very deep meaning for me.
Beautiful, my brother. And I mean, if you look at the life you have lived, you're 44 years old now, and I'm happy to just say that out loud because we've got
47, Debza, 47.
You look 44. You look 44. I'm giving you a compliment. Run with it.
Thank you, Debza. Thank you.
47 years old.
Now my wife can say she has a Ben 10.
That's it. But I mean, 47 years worth of life. I'm sure they come with a lot of color. Maybe just for the interest of people who don't know you personally, what have been kind of the defining moments that have moved you to become where you are today? Maybe share anecdotally just some of those critical moments that you believe have shaped the Songezo Sipio that we know.
Debza, there are many, but I'll mention just three and quickly. So the first one was in 1982, the first time somebody died in my family that I remember. I actually think since I had been born, somebody died in our family, and that's the whole family, which has got lots of people. And that was my uncle. He was 23 years old. He was an MK soldier, and he was killed in Lesotho by the then SA Defense Forces. And it was the first time I saw my grandmother cry. My grandmother was a very strong woman. She was exceptionally strong. I think had she lived like 30, 40 years later, she would have been a chief executive somewhere, you know. And so she was strong. The idea of my grandmother crying was just unimaginable. But over the years, as I grew up, I got to understand what the meaning of what had happened. Um, that somebody so young could give up his life for freedom, which I didn't understand. And I'd always gone through the scene through the questions of one of the elders in the village who kept asking, "Wow, was this boy killed? What was he doing?" You know, and the lawyer had to keep explaining what had happened. The lawyer came to tell us. So that was one, Debs. The second was in 1993, in fact, two in 1993, believe it or not. Sorry, the first was in 1992, the third was in 1993. 1992, I had the opportunity to meet Chris Hani. He came to our family, and my grandmother had passed on by then. And he came to pay his respects at my uncle's grave, the one I was telling you about. And he spent about 3 hours with my family, and we had like slaughtered a sheep or a pig, I can't remember, a day or two earlier. And he like had meat with us then, my grandfather, and he just sat and just chewed the fat. And I could see that my grandfather was feeling much better about things because he had just never processed the whole thing properly. And he was very proud to vote in 94. So that was a third one. Christian, just as a person, his warmth, his charm, his accessibility just had an enormous impression on me as a young person. It was my first year of varsity then. And the last one was actually in 93, the following year. And incidentally, it was not Christiani's death, it was the death of my best friend, Tando Mtembu, and four others. They were also killed by the SADF. I questioned that day whether this entire peace effort was worthwhile, because back then, as sort of teenagers, high on adrenaline, and I guess our sort of teenage energy was raging. We wanted to pick up arms, after everything that had been happening in the country. And I remember James Ngulu, he was chair of the East of the ANC in the Western Cape later on, but he was in the Transkei then. And he asked us at the University of Transkei, which is Wusu now, have any of you boys ever been shot at? Do you know what happens when somebody shoots at you? And I remember thinking, no, like, I haven't, but like, what's this guy talking about? But those were very formative for me, Debs, because I've always since then understood how much it took to get the country where it is. And I've always just had a very deep anger when things go wrong, because it's a lot. I mean, my grandmother didn't vote. She died of a broken heart since my uncle's death. I mean, she just never recovered. She got sickly and she died. She died in 1990. So, these things for me are personal. And I think it's shaped where I've ended up with Rise, because I've just never stopped caring.
Wow. Fascinating that in the three moments that shaped your life, death seems to be a kind of a golden thread. And yet you are one of the founders of an organization that is called Rise. I find that to be quite serendipitous. So let's talk a bit about just your achievements, and the reason I'm standing still here is that part of the politics that we have brought onto the platform has been about competence, has been about understanding complexity, has been about leadership, has been about the ability to shift things out of the poly crisis that we face. For a moment, let's stand still, and I know I find it sometimes very difficult to kind of look at some of the feathers in your hat. But for a moment, can you give us a sense of your professional career and the problems that you've been able to solve as a leader?
Yeah, no, thanks, James. So, I mean, my formative years were at Volkswagen in Utrecht between 1998 and 2006. I think that was 8 years. Most people thought I wouldn't leave. I wasn't a leader then, but I learned many, many things about the country, about being a professional, and I got to travel overseas. And this it a significant impact on me because I went to Germany, I went to France, I went to other countries, and I went to some pretty chaotic countries too in Europe. But I really got to see that it's possible for countries to function and for the things that we think are impossible here to be sort of very regular. Um, for instance, I realized in Germany people jaywalk, but it's very rare. People don't jaywalk. There's a sense of order, and people take their work seriously, whether they kind of work on somebody's garden or they're an engineer. They're respected for working and that sort of thing. So that had a big impact. But where I believe I began to come into my own as a human being was at Extrata, the mining company. I got to work with a bunch of people who trusted you as a professional completely to do your work. And there was a rule, which was if you make a mistake, you will not get punished for it, but you must state immediately when things go wrong, and everybody will club around you and sort out the problem. Otherwise, don't waste time pondering and wondering what you should do. Please make decisions, seize opportunities, and so on. That was a lesson I got. But as a leader, I think I really kind of stepped out on my own when I was at Business Day. I had a team of between 100 and 110 people. And being an editor is not different to being a football coach, professional football coach. Everybody sees your work every day. You need to get lots of people to with 1,000 pieces to come together and produce an edition every day, web content and so on. And you need to deal with very difficult people along the way. And Business Day did very well, I believe, when I was there and for a few years thereafter. And I really appreciated the lessons I learned as a manager and a leader of people. And I think they still stand me in good stead today.
Thanks, Songezo. Um, And then let's stand still also. I mean, life is not without its hardships. And you spoke about, working in an organization that allowed you to make mistakes. What is your relationship with failure and your relationship with challenge and loss? Because certainly, there's no ways we walk through life with just
Mm.
achievements. Yeah, I'm just curious to know, how you've been able to navigate spaces of loss and mistakes and failure.
So, in terms of, I always make an assumption when I wake up every day, and I wasn't always aware of this, that I am going to make a mistake that day. But that mistake won't define me. And that often to recover from that mistake, it's going to take the people around me. So it's important to have the right people around me that I trust completely. And I mean, I've had many, many challenging times in my career. When I was much younger, not so much because I was always somebody, sort of your boss, ready to catch you and sort it out and that sort of thing. But certainly when I was at Extrata and when I was at Business Day and at APSA in later years, I had lots of challenges. But each time I was able to rely on my team to do it. But the one I can share with everybody had to do with my final year at APSA because it was really difficult. It was during COVID. So I literally never came back to the office after we had COVID. I had a new boss, Daniel Minele, who didn't last longer than a year in the job. At APSA, I think he was in the job for just over a year. And there were lots of changes in the organization, and they were happening while we were all at home. Lots of restructuring, cost cutting, having to kind of think about retrenching people and so on. And it was actually emotionally really, really difficult for me personally. And I actually just struggled to sleep a lot of the time. But also, I mean, there were things that happened that kind of sapped my confidence, such that I think if I had not reminded myself that failure is part of life, I possibly wouldn't have gone on to the next thing, which was Rivonia Circle and then Rise Mzansi. As kind of initiatives that started from nothing. Because that whole thing with the pandemic and the challenges just saps your confidence. You're surviving every day.
Yeah.
So Debs, yeah, it was a really difficult time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I sometimes say, I mean, I've been through my own adversities that, wisdom is on the other side of pain, but you have to go through the pain. You can't kind of, deviate or take a safari tour around it. You have to go through it. And it's only after you've traversed and
Yeah,
gone through the pain that the wisdom lands and offers you a different worldview that
yeah,
unlocks so much more. So I can resonate with that. And we know that adulting these days is an extreme sport. It seems like pain
yeah,
is all around us, but that's why Rise Mzansi is here to try and alleviate some of that. Um,
absolutely.
you mentioned Rivonia Circle in passing and kind of Rise Mzansi as well. I want you to maybe talk about pioneering that journey because you have been fundamental in establishing both organizations. Rivonia
Yeah,
Circle as a non-profit, Rise Mzansi as a political party and a political movement and a political alternative. But also in that answer, I just want to get a sense of what are Songezo's politics and like what are your politics, Songezo? What is your political orientation, especially when you
yeah.
made reference to Chris Hani and how that moment was one of the moments that really affected you. Take us into your confidence and let us get to know Songezo's politics and how they brought birth and gave birth to Rivonia Circle and Rise Mzansi.
Debs, there are two things that have shaped me, and I'll share some anecdotes about myself. So I realize now that the reason my uncles and my mother were part of the struggle, which my grandparents couldn't understand, was that my grandfather in particular had a very strong sense of justice and fairness. My grandfather was annoying, Debza. He wouldn't automatically side with you. That man would want to establish the facts, kind of work out what happened, and if you were wrong, then you would get a talking to, or on the rare occasion, he would spank you, which he did very rarely, but he had a very strong sense of justice. He
Mm,
wanted everyone to be treated fairly, and he wanted to be. He was a very kind man. And in the context of politics, I must tell you, it feels weird to say that what drives me politically is fairness, it's justice. It is the desire that people get a fair shake in life. They get an opportunity to build a life and so on. And that comes from my grandfather. My grandmother, who had very zippy one-liners. One day, after my grandfather had forgiven somebody for the umpteenth time for their goats chowing our maize back in the village, she said to him, you'll sit alone in heaven looking out the windows bored while the rest of us have fun in hell. And, but she was fed up. I mean, the guy was always trying to build people, trying to talk to people, to be constructive and so on. And that really strongly influenced my politics, Debza, because even now, the thing that drives me emotionally to do what we are all doing is a sense that life is so unfair for so many people.
yeah.
And sometimes at the simplest level, I think about the things my grandfather would say and do when he sees people in the circumstances in which they are. And I know that my grandfather would not be able to sleep. He would spare nothing to help other people. And that for me has shaped who I am. It is why I feel very strongly that social democratic politics, in which the concept of solidarity is at the heart of how we achieve freedom for everybody. That's really important for the political question is, how do we ensure that every South African has a fair shake in life? How do we do that? And we take account of our history and so on. And I'm hoping that this makes sense to people, because it's easy to talk about Marxism and all of these kind of things. But Debsa, for me, these things are really personal like that. A lot of the example I've learned in my life is important. And therefore, I think, some people alternatively call me a socialist, others a neoliberal and so on. But I hope we can clear it. This is what informs my politics. Okay, Debsa is frozen. Okay. It's a bit weird when somebody that is hosting you has a connection problem. So anyway, let's just wait for Debsa. I'm not disconnected. I'm sure he's going to come back, and we can continue with the conversation. Let me just. I can see Chris Mason. What are your views on the values the country doesn't hold, though they represent freedom? So let me deal with that, Chris, while we wait for Debsa. And look, I really believe that values are important, and I have looked for a long time for the word that represents values in our indigenous languages, because I don't know what the term is in isiXhosa. I don't think we have it, but I feel that we have focused way too much on party politics, although party politics is important, but party politics, and not necessarily try to build a society, to build a community. And in that context, values are important. I don't think that values inform politics as we understand it today. And I think that is one of the main reasons we are in so much trouble as a country and as a society. And I hope that we can have a politics that is simple, that is grounded, that just relates to the things that are important to us as human beings. When we think about those that we love. Amy, you'd asked a question. What do you think happened to some of the leaders to make them so unethical and corrupt? Amy, it's power. So Amy's question is, what do I think happened to some of the leaders who then became unethical and corrupt? It's power. It's uncontrolled power. And one of the things I feel very strongly about is that we need to have the kind of rules that protect us ordinary people, and also protect those in power against their own weaknesses. Because when you've got all of the power that is available in the state, whether you are in parliament or whether you are in the government, especially the government executive, when there are as very little political consequences as we have right now, it is easy to get carried away, and the power can change you. Michelle Obama says, power doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are. And I think she's right. And so I think it is about putting mechanisms in place so that the things, the kind of power that people who are entrusted with government have is always vulnerable to being admonished by the people, basically. That is going to take time, but I think it's important that we do that. Debsa, sorry, while you were sorting out your technical glitches, we dealt with just two questions.
No problem. I'm glad that you did. And if it happens again, please continue. I seem to have a power outage in my area, so I'm trying to run on a bit of backup. But yeah, let's keep it going as much as possible.
Yeah,
I guess the new normal, which is unacceptable, is the fact that these things can happen during a candid conversation of this
yeah,
nature. Let's not deviate. And I know people are urging and burning to get right into the heart of it, but I do think we must paint the broad picture
yeah,
before we get to the details. Otherwise, we miss the essence. But maybe let me take you to Rise Mzansi.
yeah.
Literally born in November 2022, officially launched in April 2023, 6 months old, and we now find ourselves here. How did that come about, and what is happening with Rise? What is the organization that is Rise Mzansi?
So, Debza, I think that many of us over the years have come to regard politics as a transaction between ourselves as lesser beings, in inverted commas, as ordinary people, and a special class of anointed people called political leaders. Now, democracy is not supposed to work on the basis of that transaction. It is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And one of the things that came through very strongly during the work that we were doing at Rivonia Circle while I was still there, but Rivonia Circle continues to do, was the sense that people, the power must belong to the people. People must and do have the power to act on their own behalf. They must have the power to hire and fire. They must have the power to envision the country they want to live in, and so on. And and those conversations within Rivonia Circle eventually involved hundreds of people who converged on the 26th of November and decided that what we need to do is to have a political and social movement that is going to try and change South Africa, to deepen our democratic culture, to realize people's power, and to have a government and a politics that is premised on the needs and wishes of the people. That's where Rise Mzansi came from. And that informs the way we do our politics. They're very deep and intentional listening, Debsa, as you know. They're going to communities, whether it's informal settlements, townships, or villages, or tribal councils, and so on, to listen and take copious notes, and to be committed to the idea of formulating solutions that respond to the lived experiences of people. And as you know, people ask us sometimes, what's your policy on XYZ? And our answer is always the same, which is we are listening to South Africans. We are consulting with South Africans. We are going to have a People's Convention. And at the People's Convention, which is on the 6th to the 8th of October, South Africans are going to decide what is important, what needs to change, and how it needs to change. And if we are honest to the idea of serving people, we must do what the people tell us on that day.
So I'm hearing you saying that Rise Mzansi is a conduit, a platform to amplify the voice of people, but also a vehicle for a coordinated effort to respond to some of the issues of the day that we face.
Yeah, and Tabza, to realize freedom. We've tended to see freedom as being a political freedom, having political rights. That's just a part of freedom. Freedom is waking up every day and seeing that life has enormous possibilities for you. That if you work hard and you are committed and you are ethical and you are fair in how you go about building your life, you are going to succeed. It's not your race, it's not your gender, it's not your sexual orientation, it's not whether you're short or tall or fat or not, it is your character. That's probably the most important thing. And therefore, it takes us into the material issues that if you're a woman and you're feeling unsafe and you can't go for a jog or you can't go to whatever, you can't go walking in the park without somebody harassing or committing violence against you, then you are not free. If you don't have sporting facilities, you are not free. And I think what we've come to is that freedom has to be material. Freedom has to result in a good life, in a happy life, in a fulfilling life. If we can do that for most South Africans, then we will be free. We are not free until people have those things. And I think politically, that's the most important thing to internalize. The struggle for freedom continues.
Absolutely. For words and ideas and values that you've shared so far: justice, freedom, and solidarity. And I want those who are listening in to think about those as the questions come. For those who are joining us this evening, I'm sitting with Songezo Zibi. He is the national leader for Rise Mzansi. These are the fireside chats with Rise, where we are just spending a bit of time getting to know some of the national leadership collective, as well as the provincial conveners and coordinators, as part of just opening the organization and the people of the organization to people. So thank you so much for joining us. Please continue to sit by the fireside with us as we unpack all that is Songezo. I think maybe the next question, Songezo, is: what is the problem statement? I mean, if Rise Mzansi must exist, surely there's a purpose for our existence. Can you share with us what you make of the problem statement and our reason for being?
So in terms of our reason for existence as Rise Mzansi is to agitate for the restoration of power to the people. That might seem like an abstract objective, but I think it is really important. We have come to accept, wrongly so, that power belongs to political parties, that power belongs to so-called political leaders. And that is a perverse description, because in a democracy, the people we call leaders are representatives of ours. They are the people we give our power to in trust so that they may use it on our behalf. But there are behaviors that have crept into the political culture, which is those people become those who tell us what is good for us, how it is to be done, and that we must bow down to them. Why is the restoration of people's power important? The restoration of people's power is important because it is the only way we can ensure that those who represent the people continue to fulfill the objectives for which they were given that power. And so as we talk about freedom, we must recognize that if Rise Mzansi succeeds, and we will succeed, Debs, in what we're doing, if the leadership of Rise Mzansi were to end up in government, or when the leadership of Rise Mzansi ends up in government, we must necessarily, as a first objective, reduce the power that politicians have to silence and keep information away from the people, to make discretionary decisions as if that power belongs to them. We need to put mechanisms in place that ensure greater accountability, because then the people are going to have the power and accountability that they're looking for. And when they do, they will be better able to question and challenge the things that their representatives are doing. So that's important. The second and last reason, Debs, there are many, but the second and last reason, it is for everybody to understand that no one is coming to save us. Rise Mzansi doesn't belong to me, doesn't belong to you. It is for all of us who feel we need an alternative, that we need a new politics, we need a new government. Then we need to join hands together. That's why our name is Rise Mzansi. All of us needs to stand up and build the country that we are looking for. And in doing so, make sure that people ultimately have the power to determine what happens to our society.
Thanks, Songezo. So let's unpack then the vision statement for a second, which speaks about building the South Africa we deserve, a safe, a prosperous, equal, and united South Africa in one generation. Can you unpack that as the leader of Rise Mzansi? You are the chief custodian of that vision statement. What does
Yeah.
that mean to you, and how should it translate to the lives of South Africans and those who have been sitting in a state of polycrisis, disillusionment, hopelessness, and homelessness politically and spiritually?
So, in terms of the first thing is that we've got to be a society that is not so violent. That safety, a safe society, is that word in there, or that part of our vision, is not an accident. South Africans are feeling unsafe. And a lot of us, as we are here, people who are listening to this conversation, know that we are feeling unsafe. We're not safe on the roads. We're not safe in our homes. We're not safe in public spaces, especially at night and so on. And it's even worse for people who are in more vulnerable conditions, such as rural areas and so on. And it's important that we all recognize that feeling safe and secure is a basic human right. And we don't have that in South Africa for millions of people. And we must restore a sense of safety in South Africa. So that's the first thing. The second, which is being an equal society, equality, equity, comes from the value of justice. We are a country that has been shaped by over 350 years of injustice, of dispossession, which has produced the inequality that we have, alongside the corruption and the incompetence of the last 30 years of ANC government. We must always strive for to be an equal society. But what does that mean in practice? It means, Debza, if you are to put it at a policy level, that we must accept that the government or the state, which represents all of us, must dedicate more resources to people who have less than what you and I have. It's important. Otherwise, they will not have equal opportunity. The expenditure per rand per child in a poor community by the state has to be more than what the state spends for a child who comes from a wealthy family or from a wealthy area. Otherwise, we will never have the equality of opportunity that we're looking for. So equality, by using just that one example, is really important. And prosperity is that, Debza, we have internalized mediocrity of outcomes for too long. South Africans deserve the opportunity to prosper. That's how you can have limitless dreams in terms of your potential and the things that you can do. We can't have people whose best hope in life is to find a peace job, Debs. People must aspire to eventually start a business, to build a home, to be a coach, to be a community leader, and so on. We have so limited people's horizons of possibility over the years that we don't think prosperity matters. That's why I don't like terms like poverty alleviation. Why would you alleviate poverty instead of eliminating it? Let's eliminate poverty. Let's not alleviate it, because you remain poor. You don't stop being poor. So Tabs, that vision of ours then challenges us to achieve all of this in one generation. In simple terms, what is that? If a child is born today, by the time they start working, these things should have changed. It's really simple. Certainly before they buy a house, get married, and have children.
Yeah, yeah. No, thanks for unpacking that, Songezo. I say that one generation has me in it. I'm 38 years, 39 years old now. And 25, 30 years from now, I still want to be able to see, experience, and enjoy that country that is safe, that is prosperous, that is equal and united. I think we owe it even to ourselves to achieve that outcome, and not only for those who come behind us. But let's go to kind of the next one. You made mention of policy, and we are approaching, the People's Convention on the 6th to the 8th of October. And policy is a critical part of political, the political frame and the political space. We are in the space of contesting ideas in order to propel society forward. Can we get a view of Rise Mzansi approach to policy, and what are some of the key dimensions that shape how we want to build and create and achieve the South Africa we deserve? Muriel, who's on the questions, makes reference to the fact of the development of young people and women And I think, as part of answering that, my sense is you'll also respond to issues of young people and women, people with disabilities, those in rural, living in rural areas and townships and
Yeah.
etc. So tell us a bit about the policies of Rise Mzansi and where we are going in that space.
Debs, I think the first thing that we need to place on the table is the principles. It's the social democratic politics, and I won't go into any of them. But social democratic values are freedom. I described freedom earlier on, so I'm not going to do that again. It's equality. We've spoken about equality just now. It is solidarity. What is solidarity? Solidarity means we are each other's keepers in our public life, through public institutions, we make sure that no South African is left behind in terms of development and in terms of having opportunities for life. Now, that's important in the context of Muriel's question, because if we accept, for instance, two things, that young people are the endowment the country has. In other words, they are our most important inheritance. If they're our most important inheritance, then we need to be very intentional about how we provide opportunity, about how we provide safety, and so on. And I want Muriel to start us at safety and health, because those are important. By the time we get to your typical interventions about, for yes, jobs and so on, there are millions of kids in South Africa who don't have nutritious food, who suffer from stunting, who drop out of school. Those children are cut out of development opportunities because by the time they reach 10 years old, I'm sorry to use the term, but they are screwed. We must think about those people first and foremost. What is the country doing in the formative years of every human being in South Africa? That's part of development. So that's important. Food is important, safety is important, education is important, and so on. And I think that's very important. The second thing, Muriel, is education and training. 90% of young people that are unemployed either just have matric or have no matric at all. That should tell us something. So the second thing that we need to do is to make sure that we get much better education and training outcomes. And if we are able to do that, and we have an economy that results from very thoughtful political economic choices by South Africa's politicians, and let's say Rise Mzansi government, then you are able to better produce a kind of opportunities that we would have produced. If I had to say to you what are the two most important things right now for young people, I would say it is it is making sure that they've got food in their stomachs, because hunger is a big issue. The second thing is that we equip people with modern skills. If we can't do those two things, it doesn't matter what other intervention we do. It's not going to work. It's not going to get anywhere. So those are my views on how we go about ensuring that they are sustainable development and growth and prosperity opportunities for young people.
Thanks, Songezo. And I think you touched on, the politics that we have seen play themselves out in the town halls and the roundtables that we've been on for the last 6 months. And a lot of it has to do with family life and kind of the individual's ability to
Yeah.
really fully, exercise and realize their potential. There's obviously, how communities establish themselves and build. But what about the macro issues? I mean, we've got the economy, we've got the state, which has got so many elements to it. We've got the world in which we live in, which is called Earth, of which if we do not nurse and look after, it's going to show us flames. There's so many other dimensions from a policy point of view. Maybe can you give us some broad brushstrokes around some of those key elements that define the politics of Rise?
So I mean, one of the things we committed ourselves to is pragmatism. In other words, what is the best and most effective path of doing anything, right? And I would say that there maybe are five critical issues. And this comes partly from the People's Manifesto process, but what evidence shows us we need to focus on. The first thing that we need to do, Debza, is to make sure that people have food on the table. It's really, truly important. I don't think we should have abstract terms like rural development and all of this, food security and this kind of thing. We can talk about how we ensure that every family has food on the table, but in a country where people die by suicide and there are murder suicides where a mother takes her own life and takes the life of their children. And in our experience, steps that you've been in the meetings where people say hunger is a big issue. That's got to be priority number one. Even in strategy or in psychology, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food and safety and shelter are the most important things. We've absolutely got to do that. Now, there's a number of interventions that you can make in that respect, whether it is state transfers, helping people to produce food, etc., etc. We can't go through the whole list, but by way of policy priorities, I know people who can afford to stream and watch this probably don't have daily hunger as an issue, but there are millions of South Africans who have that problem. We've got to be a caring society and solve that problem and prioritize it and solve it now. So that's the first thing. The second thing, Debza, is crime. It's safety. South Africans are not safe. Poverty has something to do with it, but there's a culture of violence and crime in society. If we can't solve that problem, nobody wants to invest in places like Mthatha and Mdantsane and so on, which have a very crime rate. It's not even about capital, as it were. People don't even want to do a side gig because they're going to get robbed, they're going to get shot. I'm from Mthatha. I defy anyone to challenge me. I'll go toe to toe on it. So we've got to make sure that South Africa is a safe country. So that's the second priority. The third one is energy availability. We can't just say we want to solve load shedding. We have to have increasingly clean energy at low cost. We've got to have that as an objective. Somebody I know, and I make this example all the time, has a KFC in Queenstown. The load shedding happens at peak time. That business is not doing very well. If we can't solve that, let us stop fantasizing about any other clever solution. We've got to solve that problem. That's number 3. Number 4, we've got to solve Transnet. For those who live in Durban, if you go out towards Umhlanga and you look out on the bay, by the way, you see lots and lots of ships. Those ships are queuing for days and weeks to get into Durban Harbour and offload. And because they can't, the economy is being strangled, it's suffering. We've got to solve that problem, right? And those are just 4. And the fifth one that I'd like to say, Debs, is that we've got to keep people healthy. Our health system is collapsing. You can't build an economy with sick people that can't be looked after and so on. And I know that there's many things, Debs, but I'd like us to have a discussion about these issues, because a question we must ask: do we believe we can build prosperity without solving these 5 things? Maybe we can, but I'd like to hear from people if they think we can.
Thanks, Songezo. And I think, sometimes we're accused of being rather vague in terms of, having not gotten to a point where we've got succinct, clear policies, that respond to the multitude of intersectional challenges that we have. And I think what you have tried to do is present a view of what are the priority areas insofar as the organizational thinking is. But maybe let's let people into the process rather than the content. What is the process that will get us to the point where we believe we will present a proposition to the country that gives them the confidence that we can lead and shape the next 20 to 30 years of life in South Africa?
Debs, the themes that have emerged from the numerous People's Manifesto town halls and other meetings we've had in throughout the country are the following. The first is the family, the well-being of the family. And please, I don't mean family in a Calvinistic way. It can be a single-parent family, same-sex family, please. Family, the thing we call a household in South African policy speak. We've got to make sure households or families are okay. There is a range of issues, but that's a theme. What kind of solutions do we need to put on the table for families? So that's the first one. The second is community. In community, there's infrastructure, there's safety, there's climate change, and so on. There's a variety of things. The third one is governance. What kind of politics and governance system do we want to produce the society that we want to be? The fourth one is the economy. What kind of economy do we want to produce the prosperity that we're looking for? The fifth one, what kind of country do we want to be? What kind of political culture do we want to build? What kind of communities do we want to have? What does unity look like, and that sort of thing? What does justice and economic justice look like? The sixth and the last one is climate change. It's an existential risk. And let us please not get too obsessed with the elite conversation about how much coal we should use. If you come from KZN and other parts of the country and you suffer from floods every year and you live in a semi-formal or informal environment, you know how bad climate change is. We've got to have a solution for you. If you come from the coal belt and you suffer from respiratory illnesses, that climate change is important, and so on. So these are the 6 themes. At the convention, these are the themes that will be under discussion. The reason we have done this is because you don't want to burden ordinary people with coming up with technical solutions for which most of us are not trained anyway. If you were to ask me about law enforcement, there's only so much I can tell you, right? So those are the 6 basket of themes that will be discussed at the convention. The convention will result in a declaration about the kind of society we want to be within a generation. The outcome of that discussion will also produce a people's manifesto. That people's manifesto will be produced and published within a month or so of the convention. And then early next year, we are going to produce a people's plan for change. A people's plan for change, where we then talk about the how we are going to resolve these issues. I want to emphasize, I know I'm speaking long, but I want to emphasize that it is easy for us as people with access to information and so on to sit here and say we know what the policy priorities are and the policy solutions are. We have consciously refused to do that. Let the people speak. Let the people speak in a language that they are comfortable with, and then let the people with the skills and experience convert that conversation into policy solutions and a manifesto.
Thanks, Songezo. And I think for me, one of the interesting things that has happened over the past 6 months has been the town halls, just going into the cities and towns and communities and getting to understand what is their version of a list of priorities. And for the interest of our audience here, I'd like to take a stab at giving you a summary of the issues that have come out, but in order. Yeah. Which might interest you because you may make up your own list in your head, but this is what the majority, 90% of the town halls we have been to, and we've been to all the 9 provinces, major cities and towns, metros, rural areas, townships, etc. The first issue that was raised is drug abuse and substance abuse. Comes up very often. The second was jobs and the opportunity to build wealth and be financially independent. And a proxy to that is also food hunger, the opportunity to have a stable and consistent access to food, water, and a home. The third was mental health. We think that our communities that live outside of cities are not bothered and affected by mental health challenges, but you'd be interested to know that the number 3 issue that has affected the communities we've been to has been mental health, which also moves into the space of drug and substance abuse as well as suicide. The fourth was social infrastructure for community life. So meeting spaces, parks, places where people can convene to connect and to be one. There's a huge challenge about spaces for creative expression where people can have fun and be safe and be seen and to communicate. And then the fifth one was basic services and micro corruption. The issue of not being able to get access to basic services like electricity and water, but most importantly, access to opportunities on the basis that people use micro corruption as a barrier to access, even though people have got skills and ideas that they want to present. Would you care to comment on that summary, Songezo?
Debs, that summary is absolutely spot on. And I would say the sixth one, as you know, has also been crime safety, which is linked to the drug and alcohol abuse a lot of the time. And I want to give people who haven't been part of these conversations an insight in terms of how the conversation goes. So we don't just listen, we ask questions. Somebody says, I want a job. You ask why is a job important for you? And often, as you remember, Debs, that people say, I'm hungry, I want food. And people are ashamed to say that they go without food. I mean, it's a terrible thing, but that's what happens. When you ask about crime and so on, people say it typically happens on certain days when people are drunk, when people are high, it's typically young people and so on. The lesson, Debs, that we learn from this is that the assumptions we make about what is good for people are often not correct. And that is why we have chosen these 6 themes, because when you ask people to talk about their family, they can say, our children are beset with drugs. They suffer from mental anguish, from neglect and poverty and lack of opportunity and so on. You allow people to surface the things, the daily struggles that they go through. And the things that you are talking about, Debza, are people explaining what their daily struggles is. But as you know, Debza, they also speak very clearly about the vision they have for their communities. They talk about green spaces. They talk about safe public transport. They talk about women talk about not having to ride taxis where they are harassed by passengers and taxi drivers and so on. Now, they might not say a modern public transport system and spatial development and so on, but it's our job to then translate that into actual policy priorities. Those will come together at the convention, and then we can produce very responsive policy positions to that.
Thanks, Songezo. So invariably, there's method to the madness. The fact that people see us not having these crisp, verbose and complex policy documents is a part is by design.
No, it is absolutely by design. Debs, as you know, I wrote a book. It's been shortlisted for an award. It's very easy for all of us, right? We've got different areas of expertise, right? It's very easy to assume that we know it all. And I really ask South Africans that we take just one day to accept that we don't know other people's experiences or what's important to them. The solutions we think would be good for them might just be patronizing and unresponsive. And Rise Mzansi has committed itself to listening intently and to bring to life people's experiences and aspirations.
Thanks, Songezo. So, I mean, we talk about the National Leadership Collective. You don't work alone. You represent an organization of people. Um, we also say in our politics that we are in the business of people, and that the best must lead. Maybe let us into kind of the team that you lead as the national leader of Rise Mzansi. You don't have to speak to every single person because we don't have the time, but tell us what it means to build and work in a high performing culture and team, and how you would want to translate that into state capacity, and what people would expect in the event that Rise Mzansi would be in government.
So, Debs, the first thing I really like, it scares me at the same time about our team, is how everybody is so committed to this crazy idea. I I I sometimes think, I'll be driving and I think, but these guys are mad. There is no way. There is no way they're all so passionate and messaging at 2 a.m. and 5 a.m. and so on. But the one thing I really deeply appreciate, and it gives me hope in South Africa, is that the team that we have in Rise, its level of commitment, energy, and creativity is just a microcosm of what's possible in South Africa. We are not an exception. We are not an exception. And that fills me with joy. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, man, we're a representation of ordinary people. Most of us were not politicians. We have no political experience. The most important thing for me that really impresses me about all of you, these are people who have decided to do, to not just talk, but to do. And can we imagine how South Africa would be different if more of us just decided to do, to get involved, to go for the impossible, and so on? And so for me, the crazy bunch, if this crazy bunch that we have, not just in the National Leadership Collective, DEBSA, but as you know, in the provinces, in the districts, and so on. I was in Kimberley on Saturday. And I mean, the level of commitment. I look at these guys, they're young, they committed, they work hard, long hours, but man, they next day, early in the morning, they're on WhatsApp about work. DEBSA, our country has a bright future. Rustenburg was the same, the Northwest, Eastern Cape, and so on. And I think for anyone here, you need to look no further than the collective we have at Rise.
Amazing. We're drawing to a close. I mean, we've gone over 8 o'clock, but I think this is such an important conversation, and I think our viewers would indulge us to go in a little bit more detail, just to unpack a few other things. There's this phrase, 2024 is our 1994, a deeply triggering, a deeply profound statement, which we have connected to as Rise Mzansi. Just, share with people who are listening what that statement means to you and what it represents on Rise's side.
Well, I need to tell everyone that we got together, by the way, because I saw that I heard it from you. I heard from somebody else that I know there's lots of people now say 2024 is our 1994, but Debs, you and I were speaking last year, right? I remember I was in the Western Cape and we spoke on the phone, and there were people that were working outside where I was and making noise. But the one thing that drew me to you was that the profundity of that statement. 2024 is our 1994. 1994 was a pivotal moment. The country was facing disaster. I was there, and I'm sure lots of people on the call were there. They were grown up. The world was here to watch the orgy of violence and destruction that was going to happen. And South Africans pulled through, came together, went to the polls, voted, made the right political choices, and the country stood a chance. 30 years later, we have the same opportunity again. We can turn 2024 into our 1994. We can't be a country that spends more paying interest on debt than we do on taking care of sick people. That's where we are now. And by the way, that's where the country was in 94. The apartheid government had destroyed the economy and the state was bankrupt. And I challenge anyone who says it wasn't. I will give them facts. From 1986, the South African government couldn't afford to pay its debts. And South Africa was able to pull back from the brink. Let's do it again.
What's the cost of doing nothing?
We are going to die, Debs. I can't. I want to tell a story. My cousin is one of the very few urologists in the Eastern Cape. He was telling me that a patient of his, and he showed me the correspondence, a patient of his had internal bleeding, and they didn't have biopsy needles to drain the blood for weeks. From the end of May, and when we spoke, it was July, that patient still hadn't been treated. And he went overseas to a conference, and when he came back, that patient was gone from the hospital. He was so scared to ask what had happened to him. Debza, that's what doing nothing will do on a big scale, and we can't let it happen.
Yeah. No, agreed. So here we are heading at a heavy accelerated speed towards 2024, an election year. We have positioned ourselves not only as a political party that will contest elections in 2024, but we've also said that we are a political alternative. Can you just share with South Africans what political alternative means? Can you also just share the importance and the role of civic alliances and civil partners in that? Zolani posted a question around capitalizing and leveraging partnerships with civics, with active change drivers, etc. Maybe as part of that unpacking of the alternative question, the road to 2024, what is the broad social partnership that we're trying to build that will affect the change that we want to see?
So sometimes being an alternative means not focusing on just on what we don't want. You know, it's very easy to spend a lot of our time uh, talking about what we don't like in the ANC, what we don't like in politics, and so on. What we have in our power is to build the kind of political vehicle, the kind of political mission that will serve our national purpose, that will restore our democracy, that will give power back to the people. We've got an opportunity to do that, and we super focused. And as you know, Debza, the name ANC really comes up in our community meetings. It really ever does, because we spend a lot of time on the issues. We spend a lot of time not just talking about what is wrong. And for those, again, who have not been part of these conversations, we say, don't just tell us what's wrong, tell us how you want it to change and what it will look like when it's working right, and what role you think you can play in making it right. Right? And that's what building an alternative entails. You also know that we talk about to our leaders, because we call our volunteers and everybody involved in RISE a leader, that we always need to look for people that are better than us. In politics in South Africa, people look for minions that they're going to go with them wherever they want to go because they only listen to them. We want people who can challenge one another and so on. And so, as we go out to 2024, the most important thing for anyone who believes in the mission of RISE, be a volunteer. Be a volunteer. Come the last 9 weeks before the election, we have to have boots on the ground, and that's what we're building in every single voting district that we are contesting. That's what we need to do. And that is going to continue through the election and after the election, all the way to 2026. We are not going to stop. And so this mission is not short term. It's not just about next year. It's about 2026, about 2029. It's about changing the politics, about changing the political culture. And I'd really encourage people to get involved and volunteer.
Thanks, Songezo. And I think that separation is important, the difference between a member and a volunteer. A volunteer's right to be in the space is defined by their contribution and actions. And a member can just sign a form and sit on the peripherals and not expect change or not even contribute to it and still benefit from, being part of the organization. And that was the psychology behind us saying we don't want members, we don't want leagues, we just want volunteers and South Africans, ordinary people who want to achieve the extraordinary in one generation. As we draw close, you are a visionary. You are the national leader of Rise Mzansi. You are taking the entire country into your confidence in shaping and leading us into a new frontier. What is that South Africa we deserve? Paint a picture for us so that as we put our heads down at night this evening, we get a sense of what is possible if we get this right and when we get this right.
Debs, the South Africa that we deserve is a South Africa where we feel safe. We feel safe at home. We are safe in our communities. We are safe on the roads. We are safe in public spaces. I think that's really, really important. Crime. And let me talk about some categories of what we call crime, Debza. Many women are not safe in their own homes because people like you and I, men, beat them up and they harm them and they kill them. And sometimes we talk about this crime and violence as something that happens on the street. So part of what needs to change in this South Africa is self-change. It's us taking responsibility and holding one another accountable for the ills that we see in our society. So it's not just fighting the violence in the state realm, but also at home and in communities and so on. So that's the first thing for me. And I'll mention just three because there are many. The second is a world where the child of a single parent with low income has a realistic opportunity to be a doctor, to be an astronaut, to be a physicist, to be all of these wonderful things, and to be a chief executive. Because out of the value of solidarity, we have provided real and equitable opportunities for them to meet their potential. It can't depend on how much money you have for you to reach your potential. It can't be. And so that is the second thing. The third pertains to the politics. It is a world in which those who represent the people have a respectful fear of the people. We don't use terminology like our people as if people are children. The people are the bosses of the representative. If there is one wish, it is that the things I see in other countries where you bump into a minister on the tube, like you just think, like, okay, you've got to use the public amenities that you are forcing other people to use. And if that's not an incentive to be accountable, then I don't know what is. And those are just three things, Debs. There are many. But I think if we can politically reach a certain culture and build this society that is safe and there's real opportunity for prosperity, I think we'll be doing well.
Yeah, no, agreed. Well, ladies and gents, we are getting to the end of today. Thank you so much for joining us. We were having our first fireside chats with Rise Mzansi. And this is a platform that we've created to have conversations with members of the leadership collective of Rise Mzansi, but also the provincial leaders, and hopefully eventually we'll open the space up to a myriad of other people who are part of the ecosystem. Zolani, we have a big commitment to civil society and civic alliances, to the extent that we have a dedicated function and a leader who looks after that space. His name is Irfan Mangera, a very talented, passionate young leader who's going to do formidable things in the space of partnerships and social cohesion. But yeah, thank you to everybody for joining us. Just on a softer note, Songezo, Theo wanted to know, what are you bumping in your car, in your headphones? What music are you currently listening to that kind of, that gets you going and gets you chilled?
Debza, let me share this with everybody, hey? Because this was sent to me. I hadn't seen it, I must say. And this was sent to me on WhatsApp, and I went and I downloaded it. And it is Sombao by Dumza Maswana. Oh man. Oh, Debza. Oh. It's from 2021. It's not a new song. I had completely missed it, but it's Sombao by Dumza Maswana. It is.
Yeah.
Man. Please. Yeah.
And what do you do to chill? Outside of listening to music, how do you relax and just kind of go into a space of zen to prepare yourself for some of the very tough pieces of work that we do?
Debs, there are two things I do. One, I sleep. The second is I write. Writing gives me joy. It's something that I think might be very difficult for a lot of people, but I really get lost in the art of writing. And after 2 hours of writing, I actually don't feel exhausted in the manner that people would think that one feels exhausted. But I am usually bursting with ideas. If you want my creative juices to flow, give me 3 hours to write anything. And if I do, I come out a new person.
We're talking about writing. We did an interesting exercise. Where's mine? Let me get it here. We did an interesting exercise where
that was brilliant.
I asked the leaders of Rise to give us a sense of, if they were to have a self-titled, biography, an autobiography written under their name, in their name, what that book would be and what that title would. And as you guys can see, mine is I Am Freedom. That would be the book that I would carry, I would want to carry my name. And I'm sure we'll spend
Yeah.
some time later where I get to share. But what would be your title, and maybe tell the people why that title?
My title, Debs, if you remember, was The Road to El Dorado. And for those who know what El Dorado is, it's sort of the promised land. It is a promised land, actually, the road to El Dorado. And that is the South Africa that we're building. It's a land of milk and honey. And I must tell you, South Africa is a land of milk and honey. We just have this milk and honey being stolen and spilled and wasted. But South Africa is a land of milk and honey. We just need to have the fortitude. And this place will be an El Dorado for the whole world. In the United States, Ronald Reagan, who is not one of my political favorites, but he had a term that he used to describe the United States of America. It's a shining light on the hill. I think the new shining light on the hill for the world is South Africa. And that's why I chose that title.
Absolutely. On that note, Songezo, Zibi, thank you so much for spending the evening with us by the fire. If even when we, get as big as we dream we will be, we will actually have a room where we've got a massive fireplace or imbaula, and we will sit under the beautiful South African summer skies. And share in stories, because they form part of our DNA, and I hope one day the country we'll build will be cohesive, united, safe enough for us to even enjoy those small liberties that we had of sitting at the feet of our brothers and sisters and elders, in just understanding, the massings of life. So I look forward to continue to work with you. To everybody who joined us this evening, thank you so much. Like I said, this is the inaugural Fireside Chats with Rise Mzansi. My name is Tebogo Molausi, the national spokesperson of Rise Mzansi. Expect these to be coming once a week, probably on Sunday evenings, where we will just spend some time just getting to know some of the people behind and within Rise. We've got a very exciting journey ahead of us in the next few weeks. We've got a press conference coming up in a few days, where we will share with the media some of our plans from a policy point of view. We will also get to share, some of the more technical aspects of how we are building our think tank and the propositions that we're going to put on the table. That will then culminate and converge at the People's Convention, which is happening on the 6th to the 8th of October at Constitution Hill. We invite you to please come. The convention will have delegates who would be sitting, immersing themselves in creating and converging ideas for a better South Africa. But we will also have the People's Festival, which will be another creative space where we share and also co-craft the vision of South Africa, whilst we organize around joy and have a good time in a safe and responsible but purposeful manner. That's our journey for the next few weeks. Look out for those details, and please take the opportunity to join us in what is, I believe, going to be a historic moment, similar to another historic moment where the people of South Africa came together and made a declaration that they wanted to craft the next 40 to 50 years of life behind what we know today to be the Freedom Charter. We have an opportunity now to reflect and craft the next 30 to 50 years of the South African experience, and we want you to be a part of it. So please do join us. Details will come out shortly. But in the interim, look after yourselves, love yourselves, love your family, immerse yourselves in some of the challenges that we have, so that we can really come together in advancing the collective outcomes of our people. The songs, siyabulela Puti, man.
Thank you so much, my brother.
Inkosi Puti.
Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. Chat soon.
Cheers, bye.
Ciao, bye-bye.